Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about shock troops, specifically sword and board, just because there are so many shock troops in this game. If I tried to put them all in a video, it'd probably be an hour long. So we're mainly going to be talking about just the sword and board troops that you're going to see in battles. It's going to be your prefecture guard, your palace guards, your paladins, men-at-arms. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So there are mainly two types of sword and board troops. There is sustained fighting troops, and then there are shock troops, so to speak. And the shock troop playstyle, like you see with the prefecture guards or landsknechts, is you charge them in and you pull them out as quickly as you can, versus the sustained fighting can charge in and keep fighting for a while. The placement for these guys is definitely brawling up on the walls and pushes. They're just all around brawlers, and you can use them to push the point and counter other archers and melee troops. So if you want a good green shock troop, both the Iron Cap Swordsman and the Rat and Round Shields are really good for pub matches. Because they're rat and armor, these guys have, I don't know, something like 750 piercing defense. They're extremely fast. Their damage is a little bit lacking, but they make up for it in the tankiness that they have for 130 leadership. And you just charge them in, let them do their sustained damage. I'd always recommend trying and get around the enemy unit. It's hard to do in a one-on-one, but in a death ball, in matches, or in just a giant all-out brawl on a point, take these units, wrap them around the enemy, and then charge in or press V to get the critical damage. Iron Cap Swordsmen, you just charge them in and pull them out, and keep doing that, because I think once they're fully maxed with doctrines and honor upgrades, their charge cooldown is 10 seconds or something ridiculous. Let's go ahead and talk about Prefecture Guard a little bit, because these are one of my favorite shock troops in the game. They always have been. I actually prefer them over the Conditory. So these guys, the charge doesn't do a whole lot of damage. You're mainly using the charge as a gap closer. The cool thing about them is they have Prefecture Drill and Cover Commander. So you charge them in, turn on your Prefecture Drill with 2, and then hit the Cover Commander, and it'll increase their AI targeting and make them more effective in combat. It's a pretty basic unit. A lot of these sword and boards are simple. You just go in and brawl. But they are fun. Again, you're not going to use anything lower than purple and T-Wars, so these are just some fun siege match units. Let's go ahead and talk about paladins. Now, paladins are the seasonal promotion for men-at-arms. I believe you get them in either Season 4 or Season 5. I can't keep the season straight anymore because there's 8 of them now, and I've been playing for so long. The Shieldtron formation is why I would keep them in most of the time. Their charge does an insane amount of damage. And with all sword and board units, you definitely want to try and get Ironsides, but it is a purple doctrine, so it can be hard to get. It'll make them even tankier than they already are with the heal. Now, an important thing to keep in mind is that these guys have a trait that makes them very slow to attack. So if you just press V, they'll move in, but they're pretty slow. So the best way to use this unit when their charge is down is you have to keep Xing them in and Ving them to make them effective in combat. You can also wrap around heroes with them. And the way you do that is you use the Shieldtron formation. Say you knock down the hero right here, then you place the shield right on top of them and press V, and they will all hit that hero and pretty much instantly delete them. And because this is a seasonal promotion unit, honor upgrades that work towards the men-at-arms also apply to this unit as well. So I'd recommend picking up the Spear Sergeant and men-at-arms honor upgrades because they'll apply to your paladins and your stalwarts. Man, these loading times take forever. Here we go. So I'm just going to run through quickly the veterancy. The doctrines, I'd recommend doing the sword doctrines if you have them. The piercing, or the defense doctrine is really good, along with breakthrough and the block. Again, Ironsides. The veterancy for these, what I would recommend is top line. You can also go bottom line to make them tankier. Both are really viable. I think it just depends on your play style. I'm pretty aggressive with mine, so I went top for the cooldowns, and it helps in sustained combat, I think, a little bit more, versus the bottom line just makes them purely tanky in their stats. But again, I don't really notice a huge difference between both those lines. Surgs are a Season 2 promotional unit. They're kind of weird. They're extremely fun to play. They're very fast, and the way they work is they ignore block. So what that means is if you have, a shield unit, you can actually just charge these guys in, and they will ignore that shield unit block completely. It also works on sword and board units that have their little shields, and they do blunt damage, which means they do a huge amount of damage because most units in this game don't have a lot of blunt defense. The only downside is that the charge cooldown is really long, so I'd recommend using these as a shock troop or a burst unit, which means you charge them in, you do a little bit of damage, and you pull them out, because they are pretty squishy when it comes to tankiness. So they have the health, but they don't have as much defense as other sword and board units on the purple level. ASAPs are probably my favorite heroic sword and board troop, just because they're really fun. So these guys are kind of complicated. They have the charge, which does a decent amount of damage. Then they have their counter strike and their on watch. The counter strike, basically whenever a unit tries to attack them, if you press the 2 ability, this unit will block that attack and then counter strike. So the way you want to play it is you actually X or use your formation on top of pikes. Even when the pikes are braced, then you hit the 2 button and they will counter pike units that are braced. The on watch just does a lot of damage. It'll hit multiple units, so you use that afterwards to wipe up whatever is left. And then Ironsides, I recommend going bottom line for the on watch. Either line, so the unit will randomly counter strike, which is your 2 ability when they're top line, and randomly counter on watch, which is their 3 ability on the bottom line. I've tried both. I played around with it a lot. I'd highly recommend going bottom line, just because with the cooldown reduction, you're able to cycle between all these abilities pretty fast. If you're just in a brawl, I'd recommend charging in, using your on watch, and then counter strike, or vice versa. It really depends on the situation. So this unit takes 12% less damage when these orders are active too, and they get a buff when they climb ladders. Unfortunately, it doesn't really tell us what that is, but these units actually counter berserkers in T-Wars, and they're great for attacking the wall because of the defensive bonus they get for climbing ladders. So they are going to be viable in T-Wars. I prefer them over anything else like Paladins or Surgs or Berserkers, just because they're a fun unit and I enjoy them. So I definitely recommend getting them. The men-at-arms are kind of outphased now in the meta, just because the Paladins are better. They never really were effective, which is why they got the seasonal promotion to Paladins, so I wouldn't bother picking them up. I just wait until you do your challenges for your Paladins, and then you'll get the Paladins unit. I have them just for fun. Now, the Palace Guards. The Palace Guards are incredibly good because they're tanky, and with the top line, you do a lot of damage. And with the rework they got, I believe this season, the guard the throne stance is incredibly effective. So you just press the 2, they go into their, well actually here I can show you. They go into their little stance, and it's very hard to knock them down because they're immune to CC. So the top line is for boosting their attack. and the bottom is for making them tankier. I recommend going top just because they already have really tanky stats base. You're really trying to boost the attack damage they deal. You get cool things like an extra hit, a daze ability, and overall increases their damage. The only downside of this unit is they are very slow, but they can counter berserkers and gray hairs if you play them right. So you want to charge in. Depending on the unit, the charge will do a lot of damage. And with their shield bash, they do blunt damage, so it's pretty good. And then you can hit the 2 ability. You'll see the little animation for it. It's kind of like an orange glow. This basically makes them invincible. And then when you're ready, well, actually here, we'll just wait and I'll show you once it comes up. You can press it again and they'll start shield bashing guys and it'll really hurt. It does a lot of damage. This is a great unit and you don't have to do any seasonal challenges for it. You can just get it off the unit tree. The honor upgrades for them are pretty nice, but again, it's a huge investment of I think 150,000 honor. So I'd recommend getting all your troops first on the honor tree and then start working on honor upgrades. And again, with slow units, it's important to double tap C so they get that sprint animation. They'll move a little bit faster. But as you can see, just putting them as formation, they're going to be very tanky. And I can hit it again. They'll immediately go into combat and start killing guys with their shield bash. And where is Conditory? There we go. I wouldn't recommend going for squires at all. There's the Conditory and the Prefecture Guard that you can use as a blue sword and board. These just aren't good at all. Don't bother with them. Now let's finish up with some Conditory gameplay. Now the Condos are the blue unit in Season 3, which is the Italians. And because it's a blue unit, it's pretty easy to get and grind for. It's only 170 leadership, and it's really effective. So I'd recommend keeping them in box formation. Again, this is another burst unit, which means you charge them in, you press your shield bash ability, and then you try to pull them out. Most people go top line to boost the shield bash. I actually went bottom line to make them a lot tankier, and it allows me to pull them out and still have a decent amount of my troops left and cycle charge a lot better and a lot more times. So then we can hit, after you charge in, you hit the 2 key, they'll start shield bashing guys, and it does a lot of damage. It'll stun them. And of course, while they're standing still, they'll do their clanky clink, which you'll see a bunch of memes about. So if you V them, it's really not great, but it's also not terrible in melee combat. I'd really recommend only using them when both of these abilities are up. Charging in, getting that damage, then shock attack, and pulling out, healing, and doing it again. And again, because you're only using them for their shock attack and charge, it's going to be a lot of blunt damage. So I'd really recommend trying to put some blunt damage doctrines on them over your slashing and piercing. It's the same thing with Iron Cap Swordsman. You're only going to be charging your Iron Caps in. So I'd recommend doing blunt damage and defense. And of course, there's Sword Militia, and then your Woodcutters that can charge. The Woodcutter charge is pretty effective for a peasant unit. It's great for just a little leadership filler if you don't have enough to bring an actual unit. and it's the same play style as Iron Caps, or you can just V them in and leave them to die. Because it's a peasant, you don't really care whether they live or die. And I think that'll be it for today, guys. I hope this helped explain the mechanics of a lot of these shock troops, how they operate, and what you should be doing with them.